Hello folks. So let's speak about the month of March today. Now March has two intense planetary alignments happening. One is of course the Rahu-Mars conjunction in Taurus. I've spoken about this in a separate video and I'm going to link it below so you can have a look at that. The other thing that's happening is the Shula yoga, which is taking place in transit this month and will culminate at the time of the new moon, approximately 13th of March. Yeah, so let's get into this. All right, so I'm going to go through transits of the different planets as usual. So the first one I want to talk about is Venus. Venus is still transiting Aquarius, and it will do till the 16th of March. This is of course an improvement from the crowded space of Capricorn, but here Venus is still combust and will be until middle of April. So what this could signal is some losses and some changes in relationships and in money matters. Venus represents the concept of social interaction, including all one-on-one relationships. And Aquarius, where the transit is happening, is co-ruled by Saturn and Rahu, who of course have the common aim of reminding us that we can make plans but not to attach to the outcomes due to the unstable and unrelenting nature of life on Earth. Rahu tends to unite the masses with little regard for race or creed, and Saturn tends to protect the weak and bestows sovereignty to all beings. So, for this reason and many more, Aquarius is a difficult place for Venus. Add to that, being that it is currently combust by the proximity of the sun, it will remind us of the challenges that can be faced in relationships and community as well, where we are always learning to balance our individual needs with the other person's needs, or with the collective goals of society, for instance. In the environment of Aquarius, the voice of the masses is usually amplified over the individual. March the 17th, Venus follows the sun into Pisces. Now, normally this is a fantastic place for Venus because it gets exalted here, so it's a dignified placement. But again, with the close proximity to the sun, the watery energy that is basically Venus. What is Venus? It's Jal Tattva. It receives that fiery energy, the gaze of the sun, and this leads to combustion. Basically, in essence, Venus disappears, overwhelmed by the light of the sun. So again, even though it's in Pisces, which is its exalted state, it will lose its strength and its ability to perform here. By April the 10th, Venus moves into Aries and thus slowly away from the sun. By April 18th, Venus will move out of the combust state. Yeah. Mercury will be transiting Capricorn until March the 11th and is going to reach an exact conjunction with Jupiter on the 3rd, 4th, around the 3rd and 4th of March. So if you do counseling and teaching type of work, this is excellent conjunction for that. You can experience some breakthroughs, for example. This trio of planets with Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn in Capricorn, we will experience this until the 11th, and then Jupiter will also move out on April the 5th. So at that time, Saturn can be there on its own, which is excellent. Now this trio is actually good for building educational programs, managing investment portfolios, identifying growth avenues, and creating practical business plans. So if you wanted to do those things, this is a good time actually to focus on that, especially this coming week. From March 11th till March the 31st, Mercury will transit Aquarius. Here it's still connecting to Saturn by virtue of rulership. And most of this transit, Mercury is of course alone, with the exception of Venus there for a bit, which is excellent. So it's actually a very good transit for Mercury. Difficulties that come up with relationships this month due to the Venus position can be smoothed over with good communication because of this positive Mercury transit. Now, there is a new moon in Aquarius in the nakshatra of Purvabhadra on March the 13th at 28 degrees of Aquarius. Yeah. Now, Purvabhadra's controlling planet is Jupiter, which is situated 12th from itself, right? Because it's moving through Capricorn at the moment. Similarly, Saturn, which rules Aquarius, is also 12th from this new moon, sitting with Jupiter. So this can bring into focus what Capricorn means in your chart, yeah, what house it stands for, in the context of the Saturn and Jupiter lordship. So there can be a dissolution of sorts here as the planets are situated 12th from this new moon. And this is further augmented by the fact that we have the Shula yoga taking place at this time. Now, the Shula yoga started on March the 8th and ends during the late hours of March the 13th once the moon moves into Pisces, so right after the new moon. Shula yoga happens when all the planets are basically 3 signs, so they're concentrated in 3 signs. This doesn't include Rahu and Ketu's position. The word Shula itself is essentially denoting the word Trishul, right? It's just basically connecting with the word Trishul, which is the trident, the 3 prongs. So it can signify a cutting of sorts at this time, and the cutting can take place through words or through actions, as usual. It can impact the areas of your life that are symbolized by Capricorn and Aquarius, right? So it could be relationships, it could be work as well. So damage can be done to those significations. Now, the sun. The sun also makes a movement into Pisces on March the 14th, right after this new moon, and remains there until April the 14th. Now, normally Pisces is a comfortable environment for the sun because of Jupiter's rulership, but Jupiter is in debility at this time, and the sun here is also getting aspected by Saturn. So this aspect, whenever Saturn aspects the sun, it basically applies pressure, and perhaps some resistance also can be felt here. When Jupiter moves into Aquarius on April the 5th, this transit will feel better because the sun will also get a boost indirectly. Yeah. Now, Mars's transit. I've spoken about this in length, so you can go through the video there, but basically Mars is transiting Taurus until April the 13th. Normally this is positive, because usually around this time Venus tends to get exalted as well. And Venus is exalted for a portion of the transit, but as I said, it's almost completely combust. So in other words, ineffective. Mars will be joining Rahu, as we know, in the second house of the zodiac. So Mars joining Rahu can give the power to strive and fight for what we value, because we're talking about the second house, right? The house of worth, the house of value. So for instance, if you don't feel valued by the person you work for, like your superior, your boss, and perhaps you wanted a salary raise, well, this conjunction can kind of give you the courage to ask for it, for example. Again, it depends on where it's taking place in your chart. Mars and Rahu will exactly conjoin on the 27th and 28th of March, around the full moon, at approximately 20 degrees of Taurus. So, again, you have to check what is Taurus for you, and what is the lordship of Mars. Whenever Rahu impacts a sign, a planet, you can always expect the unexpected, right? Sort of like out of the blue kind of events can transpire now. And as I spoke about before, Rahu and Mars together actually creates a destructive impulse in you. And it has the ability to permanently and ruthlessly destroy areas of life that are impacted by it. Remember, it doesn't necessarily have to be because of a conscious drive that you have. It could also be coming from your subconscious, and usually our actions are coming from our subconscious. Usually, not always. Of course, if this is happening, if this conjunction is taking place in your 6th, 10th, 11th house, it can be very effective. It can bring positive results, because the ability to destroy the significations of these houses is actually a pretty good thing. For instance, the 6th house is what? It's debts, it's disease, it's problems, it's suffering of all kinds. In the 10th house, you need this kind of fiery impulse in order to take initiative in all matters that are connected to actions of all types, career, image, that sort of thing. So bringing the fire element to these houses can actually burn away the negative significations associated with the houses, and can give you the push and the initiative and the drive to take action, right? So it's not all around a bad thing. Mars and Rahu, of course, can also give us a strong push towards vaccine deployment at this time. Now, normally Jupiter's aspect helps by offering a stabilizing input, right? And here it's looking at that Mars and Rahu conjunction in Taurus. But because Jupiter is in debility, and also it's transiting Dhanishta, which is ruled by Mars, this aspect can further enhance the energy that we're talking about, adding to that Mars and Rahu fiery cut. So, because of Jupiter's influence, it can result in highly karmic events at this time also. Now, finally, what else is happening? Full moon at the end of the month in Virgo, in the nakshatra of Hasta. The full moon is at 14 degrees of Virgo, opposite the sun, which is at 14 degrees of Pisces, in the evening hours of March the 28th. This moon is actually getting aspected by two benefics. Venus is aspecting the moon, actually precisely, because it's also in 14 degrees of Pisces. But because it's in 14 degrees of Pisces and the sun is also there, it's completely combust. Jupiter is also aspecting, but it's a very, very wide aspect from a debilitated Jupiter. The strongest aspect is by Rahu from Taurus. So again, at this time relationships could go through some transformation, which normally happens with the combustion of Sun and Venus. So there could be fights resulting from suspicions and fears in relationships at this time. Sun and Venus are in, they're both in Uttarabhadra, whose controlling planet is Saturn. This nakshatra signifies the deep subconscious, disassociation, detachment. So it's excellent actually for any kind of spiritual work. It also gives the ability to access the deep subconscious, and here it's connecting with a full moon. So relationships and money matters will be impacted, right? Because of Venus's presence there. And you may see these matters more clearly also at this time. Being that both Sun and Venus go into the Scorpio Navamsha, this can result in severing ties with some people due to long periods of distance, due to long periods of silence, maybe some old grudges, that kind of thing. Here we also see the theme of Venus and Sun, and of course the usual when they come together, the balancing act that's required to maintain sovereignty, which is the Sun, while engaging in authentic relationships with others, which is Venus. So combustion with Venus normally brings it can bring some anger and turbulence, but it usually brings some sort of transformation also, because we're talking about the fire energy connecting with Venus, right? Normally an exalted Venus, however, helps us to see the bigger picture and not get bogged down by some of the petty matters that come up in relationships all the time. But again, due to its combustion, it may lose the strength to be able to do that. This also coupled with that Rahu and Mars conjunction can bring problems to the surface that you may have swept away for a long time. So that's all for now, folks. But there's a much easier month coming in April, so stay tuned. Cheers. All the best.